And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and these are 10 more Commander staples that I just never put in any of my decks. And this list is a little bit different than the first list I did. The first list was cards that, I mean, again, just like the last list, those cards are all fantastic. They're Commander staples for a reason. I'm not saying they're not good. This list, though, is more cards that, you know, I just don't even know why I don't put them in my decks. The last list I had specific reasons. For most of the cards on that list, I gave specific reasons why I don't like playing them. Basically, the cards on that list fell into two categories, which is, first of all, some of them are a little overrated. I just think they're not as good as maybe some people think they are. And then the other part of that list was cards that are completely busted, in my opinion, and everybody knows it, like Rhystic Study, and I don't play them because of that reason. You know, it sort of just makes you a target. It sort of goes to my philosophy of the format, which, you know, even though Rhystic Study is a super good card, is it actually worth it to put in play? So that's why I started taking cards like that out of my deck. And I'll start off this list with an honorable mention, which is Cyclonic Rift. And this card I have put in a ton of decks. I used to put it in all my decks. I loved it because it was an answer for everything. But it has become that card that everybody hates. I think, man, I don't know if there's a card I've heard more hate about than Cyclonic Rift. Maybe counterspells in general. I think counterspells on a whole I've heard the most complaining about since I started my channel. Cyclonic Rift, like we're talking about individual cards, Cyclonic Rift is definitely the one card I think I've heard the most complaining about. And so I started taking it out of all my decks, all right? So that it's an honorable mention because I have definitely put it, I used to have it on all my decks that would fit it because I liked that it was an answer to a lot of things. Started taking it out because, man, people, again, you better win the game, basically, right? Just like with Smothering Tithe, the Rhystic Study, or any of these cards, Cyclonic Rift is so hated in the format that you better be winning the game pretty quick when you cast it. And I know people will say, "Oh well, people do. They cast Cyclonic Rift and they win the next turn." I never see that. You know, I talk about this in my Cyclonic Rift is overrated video. It's again really good in the format. Please don't tell me that. I know why it's good. Okay. The thing is, I think people a lot of time think, oh, someone casts a Cyclonic Rift on your end step and then on their turn they untap and win. I've never seen that happen ever in a game. Ever. Every Cyclonic Rift I've ever seen cast, and I don't want to go on a huge rant about Cyclonic Rift here, but every Cyclonic Rift I've ever seen cast, everyone just untaps on their turn and then empties their hand again. It never ends the game. Maybe it puts that person ahead quite a bit so that they eventually win the game, but usually it doesn't happen for a few turns. I started taking it out of all my decks. I have it in maybe one deck right now. It's just not worth it because you cast it, and when I cast it, again, it's just an answer, just slows everyone down, but it turns you into the arch enemy for like the rest of the game. So is it worth it, right? Just like with a lot of the cards, the first turn Soul Ring, you know, a Smothering Tithe, the Rhystic Study, all these cards I started taking out of my deck because I started thinking, is what you're getting out of it worth the attention you're going to bring to yourself? I win so many games because I'm not bringing attention to myself, and everyone else is wasting all their resources on everybody else, and I'm just sitting there pretty and not having to worry about anything. And then once a couple of players have been knocked out, then I bring on all the steam, right? So I guess this goes into my philosophy of how I play the game, and that's why Cyclonic Rift I started taking out of all my decks. Doesn't really have much to do with the rest of this video, though, because a lot of the cards on this video don't fit into that category. They're just great cards that I've never really played before. So starting out at number 10, Basalt Monolith. And this is a really interesting card. This used to be, when I first started playing, everybody put this in their deck. I don't see it that much anymore. I've never put it in a deck. It combos really well with Rings of Brighthearth, combos with Zerta. So obviously, if you're putting it in your deck for that reason, great. You know, it's an infinite mana combo. If that's what you're going for, that's what you're going to get. As an actual mana rock, I actually think it's bad, right? If you compare this to like a Worn Power Stone, I put Worn Power Stone in all my decks. That's my favorite mana rock now, I think. If you compare the two, Worn Power Stone comes into play tapped, which typically isn't a bad thing because I find that I don't really need to use the mana right away. And then every turn I'm tapping for 2 mana. This comes into play. You can tap it for 3 mana right away, but then it doesn't untap. And unless you have a way to untap it or you're comboing off, I don't think it's actually not a great mana rock, in my opinion. A lot of those, and you could even say Mana Vault, for example. Mana Vault's a busted card, no question, but you got to untap it. So it's great for that immediate mana boost. It's almost like a ritual in a way. I can't count how many times I've seen someone play a Basalt Monolith or a Mana Vault and use it once and then not untap it for the rest of the game because they're just too busy doing other things. They don't want to put the mana into untapping it. So I think, those cards, and Basalt Monolith in particular, are great if you really, really need that mana boost quickly, like you're using it almost as a ritual effect, or if you have a way to untap it, like you have, artifact untap or permanent untap effects in your deck. It's great because it does tap for 3 mana, or if you have the combo potential with, like, say, a Zerta. Other than that, it's just not great, actually, as a mana rock, and I've never put it in a deck. Coming in at number 9, Field of the Dead. And I've talked about this on my utility lands video. I had it in that video. It was pretty high on the list. It is definitely a very good card. I think it is way more busted in other formats than it is in Commander because it, just creating 2/2 zombies is not super overwhelming in a Commander game. Just my opponent, even my opponent really goes off and creates like 5 2/2 zombies or 6 2/2 zombies. Okay, that's not great. I mean, I just don't think that's super fantastic or overwhelming. For me, it's not worth a place in my deck to have a colorless land that comes into play tapped. I would much rather play something like an Arcane Lighthouse or a Blast Zone or something that can save me the game. Like a Blast Zone or a Scavenger Grounds or something like that can actually save the game, can really be a tide-turning effect. Field of the Dead can too, if you can really take advantage of it. I think it is a little overplayed in the format. I've never put it in a deck myself. It's definitely good. I don't want to say it's not. It is a fantastic card. I think people put it in a few more decks than they should. A lot of times I've seen, again, a lot of times a Field of the Dead come into play and not create a single zombie in a whole game. So I don't know, that's just me. It's a great card, but I've never put it in a deck. Coming in at number 8, Mirage Mirror, 3 mana artifact. And I'm not really reading these cards. I don't know if I have to. I'm sure everyone knows what they do, but maybe I should just in case. You can pay 2 and Mirage Mirror becomes a copy of target artifact, creature, enchantment, or land until end of turn. Fantastic card. Again, and as we get up to the more top of this list, some of the cards on the bottom are maybe, I think, a little overrated. This card's fantastic. You can put it in any deck. I never have. I've never put this in a deck. It's just one of those cards that, I mean, yeah, you could put it in any deck, but I can't find room for it because I don't have any deck that's doing specifically this, copying stuff. I get it. It's always going to be good. Being able to copy stuff, the fact that you can save it from removal, someone board wipes and you can pay 2 mana and turn it into a land, I just can't find room for it. Why have I never put this in a deck? I don't know. To me, it doesn't come to the forefront of my mind when I'm deck building, and there's a lot of cards on this list that are going to fit into that category of I'm just putting a deck together. It just doesn't come to mind for me because it's not in my registry or whatever you want to call it. So I've just never put it in a deck, even though it's a fantastic card in a Commander game. Another really, really fantastic card in a Commander game is an opposition agent, and this one hasn't been around as long, but when it came out, I was like, oh, it's great. I like Tutor Hate. Yeah, who doesn't want to do that, right? But never put it in a deck. Don't know why. Maybe I should. Some of these cards I'm thinking, okay, I definitely got to put an opposition agent in a deck, right? Because that's what I like to do. For me, I like to put, a card like this, I like to find at least one deck it can fit into. You don't have to put it in all. Like I could put Mirage Mirror in one deck just so I can have it in a deck that I can play with once in a while. It doesn't have to go in all your decks. So I'm thinking I could put opposition agent in one of my decks. What deck would it be though, right? It's just one of those cards again, and a lot of cards on this list are cards that are just really, really good cards that you could put in any deck. But because they are not terribly specific, you're not going to find the room for them in certain strategies of what you're doing in your deck. And what are you going to take out to put them in, right? This is one of those cards. I just haven't gotten around to putting in any decks yet, I guess. Coming in at number 6, Fact or Fiction. Just an absolute Commander staple for many, many years. And, a really fun card. Just a really fun, super interesting card. If you haven't seen it before, 3 and a blue instant, reveal the top 5 cards of your library. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. put one pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. Just a really great value card, and particularly good if you want stuff in your graveyard so that there's a win-win situation here. Also great in a politics way where you can, point it at the opponent that is going to give you, say, a removal spell or something if you want to get something off the table. Great card in a commander game. Fantastic. Great card advantage. Just never, I've never put it in a deck, ever. Just never put it in a deck. Why? I don't know. I think about my mono blue Abishon deck. Just can't think of what I would take out to put this in. I mean, it's great card advantage. Great. I don't have problems drawing cards in that deck, so don't really need it for that. So I'm thinking, what am I putting this in there for? For me, if I had specifically a deck that I wanted to put my stuff in my graveyard, that I definitely would do that. If I was playing the opponent's choice deck idea that I had, I would put it in there. Just even though you could put this in any deck, I probably wouldn't put it in my deck unless I had a specific reason to, if that makes any sense. Coming in at number 5, Cathars Crusade. 3 white enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Yeah, I've never put this in a deck. I mean, this is a phenomenal card. Phenomenal. Again, I'm not saying any of these cards are bad. This is just amazing. You could put it in any creature-heavy deck, +1/+1 counter deck, token theme. It's great. It's been a commander staple forever for that reason. I've never put it in a deck. Never. I mean, this one a little bit falls into the other category, where, a lot of those cards were so overplayed when I first started playing that it just sort of turned me off of it. I would just see Cathars Crusade in every game because people would just put it in all their decks because it's so good. And it just sort of that kind of made me not want to play it. And now I've gotten to the point now where, again, it's not in my registry when I'm building a deck. So I'm just I'm not, I avoid putting it in there. I don't, at some point, if I made a deck that was a +1/+1 counter theme, I might put it in there. I mean, I definitely can think of a couple of decks I have that this would be amazing in. Am I going to put it in there? Probably not. It also does a little bit fall into the category of making you a target because it is such a powerful effect. So it little bit falls into that Ristic study category where it's just a removal magnet for one, and also it's going to make you a target as soon as it hits the table. So that's another reason that maybe I avoid it. Great card, though. Coming in at number 4, Thran Dynamo. 4-mana artifact that taps to add 3 colorless. And this, I would say, is better than Basalt Monolith. I would put this in my deck over Basalt Monolith for sure. Again, it costs 1 more, but doesn't have any downside, right? Again, I say this about Soul Ring and Mana Crypt. I think Soul Ring is way better in a casual deck than Mana Crypt because it does the same thing. It only costs 1 more, but has 0 downside. I would rather pay the 1 more mana and have no downside. I don't think the 1 mana, it makes that big of a difference in a casual commander game. Thran Dynamo for me is way better than Basalt Monolith. Again, unless you're comboing off or something, it has no downside. Just taps for 3 colorless mana, untaps every turn normally, use it again. I've never put it in a deck. Never. It's great. It's fantastic mana rock in the format, particularly in I wouldn't play this in a deck that has lots of colors because it's adding colorless mana. I mean, geez, even Soul Ring. I see people play Soul Ring in an Atraxa deck and sitting there not getting used very often, right? In a deck that has, a monocolored deck, certainly an artifact deck or a colorless, Eldrazi deck or something, it's going to be absolutely fantastic. And in a monocolored deck, it's great because you don't care so much about the colors. Why have I never put this in a deck? I don't know. It's I use Hedron Archive a lot. I like the fact that later in the game I can sacrifice it to draw the cards if I'm running out of steam. So in a mono white deck, I'm going to put Hedron Archive in my mono white deck over Thran Dynamo because I know that I might run into issues later in the game with cards in hand, and so I can sack it to draw a couple cards because I'm not going to need the mana. So I like that. Thran Dynamo is, it's great. It's great. I can't say anything bad about it. Nothing. Why have I never put it in a deck? I don't know. Coming in at number 3, Praetor's Grasp. 1 black sorcery. Search target opponent's library for a card and exile it face down. Then that player shuffles. You may look at that card and play it for as long as it remains exiled. Again, commander staple, been around for a long time. I just talked about this, I guess a couple months ago now. cards that desperately need a reprint, I think. And here's me being objective because I've never put this in a deck, but yet I'm still calling it for it to be reprinted, even though I personally don't need it to be reprinted because I don't have it in any decks and I don't play it in any decks. It's a $14 card that is a commander staple that has never been reprinted, so I think it deserves a reprint, even though I have it in no decks. I have this in no decks. It's great in a mono black deck. I really like it in a mono black deck because, a lot of people like the I get to play my opponent's stuff thing. I don't love that as much. Again, I feel that it really rubs people the wrong way, and so that's one thing that I actually try to avoid in a commander game. I like it in a mono black deck because I can go get a card to deal with something that maybe I can't deal with. It can go get answers. It can even go get a tutor, and then I can tutor for something in my library that I want to answer something else. It's a great card. It's a great card. It also even can get rid of your opponent's win con. If your opponent has a Thassa's Oracle or something, you can go get their Thassa's Oracle out of their deck, just leave it in exile so that they can't use it. It's a fantastic card in a commander game, no question. I've never put it in a deck. Not too sure why. Again, it's one of those cards, like Fact or Fiction or Mirage Mirror that you can put in every deck. So maybe that's why. Maybe the cards that are so open-ended that you could put them in any deck, I just don't find a reason to put them in my decks. Maybe. But moving on to number 2, Mirari's Wake, 3 green and white enchantment. Creatures you control get +1/+1. That's pretty great. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana of that type the land produced. Just fantastic card. I mean, it's an anthem and a mana doubler all in one. Goes in so many decks. I've never put it in a deck, ever. Again, been a commander staple forever. Been reprinted a ton because of that. You could put it in any deck and it's going to be good. For me, I'm thinking, when Immortal Sun came out, I don't like Planeswalkers. And that's another thing. I guess I could have added on this list Planeswalkers, period, because I've never put a Planeswalker in any deck, in any format. I don't like them. That's another story for another day. Mirari's Wake, to me, it's definitely good. I sort of ended up replacing it with Immortal Sun. Even though I never put Mirari's Wake in a deck, I replaced it with Immortal Sun without knowing that I was doing so because Immortal Sun obviously is very similar. It doesn't double your mana, but it cheapens your spells. Also is an anthem. All in all, I think I would probably rather put Immortal Sun in a deck than Mirari's Wake. And obviously it's colorless, so it goes in every deck. I have one deck that I could put this in, and that's my Shanna deck. It would definitely fit in there. The Anthem effect would help. It's a token theme. Mana doubling always helps. I just haven't put it in there. I mean, why? I don't know. Again, a lot of the cards on this list it's a fantastic card that you could put in any of your commander decks, and I just never have, and I'm not sure why. Maybe, a lot of these cards are just generically good, so maybe that's why. Some of them, especially the number 1 card on this list, are cards that I saw all over the place when I first started playing, and it sort of just turned me off of it a little bit. So maybe that's why. But moving on to number 1, Avenger of Zendikar. And yes, I saw it all over the place when I first started playing. A little bit less now. It's still really, really popular in the format. Obviously a commander staple for a long, long time. It's a great card. Absolutely a great card. It really became that card that people would shoehorn into all of their decks, no matter what they were doing. If you're playing a deck that has green, you play Avenger of Zendikar. It really, man, did I see it a lot back in the day. It was like Consecrated Sphinx. If you were playing a blue deck, you just put that in there automatically. Didn't matter what you were doing in the deck. I will say, I think it's a little overrated. I don't think I've ever seen an Avenger of Zendikar close out a game. I saw a guy once get Avenger of Zendikar and Craterhoof Behemoth, and he had a Chroma's Memorial, so all his creatures had haste, and he ended the game. So that's a combination of cards. I've never seen an Avenger of Zendikar on its own win a game. Usually someone plays it and they're, I put a couple counters on all my plants because I get a fetch land out or something. And then someone just board wipes or something. Or, someone kills the Avenger of Zendikar in response to the land drop or something. Or, it usually doesn't end up doing a whole lot. It sort of plays into the Field of the Dead. And again, it's a great card. Fantastic. I'm not saying it's not, but again, like with the Field of the Dead thing, I get the 0/1 plant tokens. Say I get 7 of them, right? Because I have 7 lands because my Avenger of Zendikar costs 7. I put a counter on each of them. Now I have 7 1/2s. Yeah, that's not great. In a commander game, that's not great. You're dealing 7. Even if on your next turn you play a land, if nobody screws with you at all, your next turn you play another land. Now you have 7 2/3s. That's still not great. Even if you attack one guy and they don't block anything, which is unlikely, that's 14 damage. It's okay. So I think it's a little overrated, and I think people have realized that because I've seen it a lot less. It's a fantastic card. I don't want to say it's not. I would definitely play this card. I mean, obviously it's better in a landfall deck because you can get lots of those landfall triggers. There's so many great cards for landfall decks, though, that maybe this has even got bumped off of that list. I really like it in a token theme. If you're playing a plant tribal, it's great. That would be funny because it does put a +1/+1 counter on each plant you control. So maybe if you're doing plant tribal, it's going to put +1/+1 counters on all your plants, not just your plant tokens that you just created. So it would be a funny fit in a deck like that. I've never put it in a deck. I just never had, again, my Shanna deck would be the one deck where I think it would fit. I definitely could put it in there. I could put Mirari's Wake and Avenger of Zendikar in that deck. Probably would make that deck better. It's just not a fun, interesting card. And because I've seen it so much, maybe that's what makes it really boring for me. I guess maybe a lot of the cards on this list are just kind of boring. I'm just kind of bored. It's not exciting. It's not interesting. Not really doing much. That plays into a lot of it for me. These cards are all great. You can comment below and tell me why you think these cards are better than what I think. I think they're all great. I really do. They're all Commander staples for a reason. I've just never put them in any of my decks. And most of them is just because, I don't know, I guess because they're generically good. I don't have a reason to put them in my deck. I tend to put cards in my decks that are good, but also more synergistic with what I'm doing in my deck rather than just generically good. And I don't think any of these cards on this list are synergistic with any of my decks. Maybe Cathars Crusade. And a couple of the cards suffer a little bit on this list from being, I just saw them so much back in the day that I'm just so done with them. I'm just I don't know if I want to put it in my deck because I'm just so bored with them. So it's a little bit of that as well. But what do you guys think? What cards do you just not put in your deck? You never play their Commander staples that everyone plays and you don't. And you're not really sure why, right? A lot of this list for me is, I'm not really sure why I don't play these cards. I just have never put any of them in decks for whatever reason. What is that card for you? But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.